It was supposed to be a quiet weekend getaway. Nothing more than a break from the city's hustle and the mundane routine of work. My name's Noah. I've always been the outdoors type, hiking, camping, road trips, anything that got me out of the house and away from people. So, when a friend suggested a weekend camping trip in the middle of nowhere, I didn't think twice. I'm not one for fancy resorts or crowded destinations. I love isolation. A weekend in the desert, away from everything and everyone, was exactly what I needed. I'd been driving for hours. The road had been empty since the last gas station, and that was hours ago. The sun had set, leaving the sky a mix of deep oranges and purples. Out here, in the desert, everything is so quiet. The air was thick and dry, and the silence felt heavy, almost suffocating. There was a strange sense of calm, but also something more unsettling about the emptiness. I was headed down a long, lonely highway, a dirt path that stretched for miles in either direction. No lights, no towns for miles, just the occasional cactus or shrub. The GPS on my phone had started acting up a few hours ago, so I had to rely on the rough directions I jotted down from a map I found online. Honestly, I didn't think too much about it at the time. The area was remote, but it was legal to camp here. No signs of life, no signs of anything really. Just me and the desert. It was around midnight when it first happened. The desert's chill was creeping in, and the road started getting rougher. I was beginning to wonder if I had made a mistake when I heard a low, faint sound, almost like a howl, but not quite. It was far off in the distance, barely audible over the sound of my truck. At first, I thought it was the wind. The desert's known for creating strange noises in the dead of night. But this didn't sound like any wind I'd heard before. The howl was long, drawn out, almost mournful. It sent a chill down my spine. I shook it off, tried to focus on the road ahead, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was it an animal? Some kind of wild creature? Maybe a coyote or a mountain lion? But this was different. It was too deliberate, too human. I shrugged it off, figuring I'd be at the campsite soon and I could forget about it. I kept driving. By the time I arrived at the campsite, I was exhausted. I pulled off the road, a little off the beaten path, into a small clearing. The only sign of civilization for miles was a fire pit and a few makeshift chairs, left behind by previous campers. No one else around. The campsite was secluded, just the way I liked it. No crowds, no noise, just the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustling of the wind. I set up my tent quickly and started a fire. It was peaceful, maybe too peaceful. The fire crackled and popped as I sat back in my chair, letting the warmth of the flames seep into my skin. The night was cold, but the desert silence was even colder. My thoughts started to drift, and for a moment, I almost forgot about the strange sound I'd heard earlier. But then, as if on cue, the howl returned. Louder this time, closer. My heart skipped a beat. I froze. It wasn't a coyote. It wasn't any animal I knew. This was something else. I stood up from the fire, scanning the darkness around me. Nothing. I was about to sit back down when I heard it. A faint crunching sound from behind me. Soft, like someone walking on the sand. But when I turned around, there was no one there. My stomach twisted. I felt that creeping sensation of being watched. The air felt heavier now, like it was pressing in on me. The fire's glow seemed to flicker in a strange way, casting shadows that danced around like they had a life of their own. I reached for my flashlight, but before I could turn it on, the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. Not even the wind moving. For a moment, I stood there, paralyzed. My brain was racing, trying to rationalize what was happening. It was probably some other camper, I thought. Maybe they were out there hiking, lost in the dark. Or maybe it was an animal, something moving through the brush. But the silence felt wrong. There was something off about it. And then, as I stood frozen in place, I heard a voice. Barely a whisper, but unmistakable. Who's there? I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the dark for any sign of movement. Nothing. My heart was pounding now. It wasn't just the footsteps. It wasn't just the howl. There was someone out there, someone who knew I was here. I shouted into the darkness. trying to sound confident, trying to convince myself that I wasn't alone. "Hey, is someone out there?" For a moment, there was no answer. Then, just as I started to turn back toward the fire, I heard a faint reply. "Lo, horse, I see you." I froze. The voice wasn't coming from the direction of the footsteps. It was coming from behind me, from the trees, from somewhere deeper in the desert. My flashlight was still in my hand, but I didn't dare shine it in the direction of the voice. I was too scared to move, too scared to make a sound. I don't know how long I stood there, too terrified to blink. But then, I heard it again, closer this time, the sound of footsteps in the sand, slow and deliberate. And that's when I saw him. He stepped into the light. Barely visible at first, just a silhouette against the dark. He was tall, thin, and wearing a ragged coat that didn't seem to belong in the desert. His face was obscured by a hood, but the outline of his figure sent an overwhelming sense of dread through me. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, watching me, waiting. The air felt electric, charged with energy I couldn't explain. I should have run. I should have grabbed my stuff and bolted for the truck. But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then he spoke again. "You're not supposed to be here." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" The man took a step closer. I felt my legs tremble. "Leave. Now." But something in his eyes, something in the way he spoke, made it clear that it was a suggestion. It was a warning. The man didn't move any closer, but I could feel the weight of his presence. I didn't think. I didn't stop to grab anything. I just ran. I sprinted back to the truck, my heart hammering in my chest. The wind howled in my ears. The sand kicked up in my face. I could hear him behind me, the sound of his footsteps keeping pace with mine. My mind screamed at me to keep moving, to not look back. By the time I reached the truck, I could barely catch my breath. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the door open. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if he was still there. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest town. The desert felt like a lifetime ago. The air felt safer. The lights of civilization a welcome sight. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. The strange man, the warning, the eerie way he knew I wasn't supposed to be there. It all felt wrong. I didn't report the incident. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A man in the desert, a warning, a voice in the dark. It sounded like a bad dream, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. That was a year ago. The desert is still there. The highway, the campsites, the quiet nights under the stars. But I'll never forget the look in that man's eyes. The way he spoke, the way he knew things he shouldn't. And the worst part? I never found out who he was, or why he was there. I've tried to forget, but every time I hear that low howl in the distance, I can't help but think of him, of what he wanted, of what he knew. And as for the desert, I have a feeling the next time I go there, it won't just be him I'll have to worry about. It's been a year since that night in the desert, and I still can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. Something knows my every move. I've tried to push it all to the back of my mind, moved on with life. But every time I think I'm free of it, every time I start to feel like I can breathe again, the memories come rushing back. And the questions. What did the man want? Why did he warn me? And most of all, what did he mean when he said, "You're not supposed to be here"? I thought I was done with the desert, done with a strange man in the shadows, the whispers in the dark. But sometimes, life has a funny way of dragging you back to the things you're trying to escape. It was Tessa, an old friend of mine, who convinced me to go. She's been trying to get me to do something adventurous for months. I'd told her about what happened that night, but I had downplayed it, made it sound less real. You know, like a bad dream or a coincidence. So, when she suggested a road trip to the desert again, I thought I could finally put my fears to rest. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks, nothing more. We drove for the same stretch of highway I had taken a year before, the same desolate landscape that felt so empty and eerie. But this time, The silence felt different. It was still the desert, still isolated, but it felt like something was waiting, watching. We arrived at the same campsite I'd stayed at before. The clearing was still empty as I expected. The sky was cloudless. The stars just starting to appear, their faint light casting long shadows across the desert floor. Tessa was excited, setting up her tent and unpacking our gear, but I could feel the unease creeping in. After we set up the campfire, I tried to act normal. I didn't want to let Tessa see how rattled I was. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that I was just overthinking things. But then, just like last time, the sound came. That low, distant howl. A long, drawn-out cry, almost human in its tone. It sent a shiver down my spine. Tessa didn't seem to notice, or maybe she didn't care, but I couldn't ignore it. Not after everything that had happened. I glanced around, but there was nothing. No movement, no sign of life. The desert was as still as ever. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just an animal, maybe a coyote. But deep down, I knew that wasn't right. This was the same sound, the same eerie, unsettling howl. It felt intentional. And then it happened again. Footsteps in the sand. Slow, methodical. I jumped to my feet, my heart racing. Tessa looked over at me, puzzled. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied, just a little tired. But the footsteps, they were getting closer. Too close. My breath quickened. My hands started to shake. I glanced around the campfire, half expecting to see someone standing just beyond the light. But nothing. Just the darkness of the desert stretching out before us. The footsteps stopped. The air felt thick. I turned my head slowly, hard in my throat. There, standing just outside the light of the fire, was a figure. At first, it was just a shadow, a shape against the dark desert. But as I focused, I could make out the details. A tall figure, shrouded in a dark cloak. The kind of cloak that didn't belong here, in the desert. The kind that looked like it was from another time. Tessa didn't see him yet. She was still fiddling with the camp gear, her back to the figure. My voice caught in my throat. I couldn't speak, couldn't even move. The figure didn't move, just stood there, staring at me with those dark, empty eyes that I could barely make out. I could feel him watching me, waiting. His presence was like a weight on my chest. I took a step back, trying to find my voice. "Tessa," I croaked, my throat dry. She turned around, but when she looked where I was pointing, the figure was gone. "Are you okay?" she asked, clearly not understanding what I had just seen. "I saw him," I said, my voice shaky. "He was just standing there." She rolled her eyes. "You're just tired, Noah. It's the desert. You're hearing things." But I knew what I'd seen. I knew he had been standing there. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just coincidence. I didn't want to tell her the whole story. Not yet. I didn't want to sound insane. But there was something wrong. Something dangerous is out here. As the night dragged on, I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that I was just overreacting. But the feeling of being watched never left. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear the soft crunch of footsteps in the sand, slowly approaching. And then the whisper, a voice, just loud enough for me to hear. "You're not supposed to be here." The word sent a chill down my spine, like icy fingers running down my back. Tessa was asleep in her tent. I found myself unable to relax. I kept scanning the dark desert, convinced someone or something was out there, watching me. I kept hearing the sounds of footsteps. I knew they weren't my own. I knew I wasn't imagining it. They were coming closer, just on the edge of my hearing, like they were circling me. I couldn't see anyone, but the feeling of being hunted, was unbearable. The next morning, I checked the area around the campsite, but there was nothing. No sign of anyone having been there. No footprints. Just the same empty desert. I asked Tessa if she heard anything during the night, but she just shrugged it off. She thought I was just being paranoid. But I knew something was wrong. That afternoon, I went to the nearest gas station. I asked the clerk if anyone else had been out in the desert, camping or hiking. She gave me a strange look, but said no. The desert was empty. she said. No one came out this far. Something in her voice made my skin crawl. It felt like she was hiding something. But I didn't press her further. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there, whatever I'd seen, had been waiting for me. That night, as we packed up to leave, I noticed something. A symbol scratched into the side of my truck. It was crude, jagged, and looked almost ancient. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't anything I'd seen before, and the odd part was that it was placed in a spot that would have been impossible for me to see from the driver's seat. My blood ran cold. I reached out to touch it, but Tessa stopped me. "What is it?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "I don't know," I muttered, "but I think we're being followed." I don't know how long we drove, but it wasn't enough. We hadn't even made it halfway back to the highway when I saw it. A car, tailing us from behind. Its headlights were so far off in the distance, it was hard to tell if it was even following us or just another vehicle. But as it drew closer, I felt again the unmistakable feeling of being hunted. I pulled off the road, heart pounding, and the car followed. It stopped a few yards behind us. And then the figure stepped out. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The figure was standing in the headlights now. The same cloak, the same empty eyes. And this time he wasn't alone. Behind him, more figures. I felt the air shift around me, like the desert itself was holding its breath. I reached for the door handle, but before I could open it, one of the figures raised a hand. And then the lights went out. It was the darkest I'd ever seen the desert. The lights, those headlights, flickered and then went out. In that moment, everything froze. The world went still. No sounds, no movement, just me, Tessa, and those figures standing in the desert. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the empty road in front of me, but the silence was unbearable. The air felt thicker now, heavier, like someone was pressing down on us. I didn't dare look at Tessa. She was scared. I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick. She must have been terrified too. But we were trapped. There was no way out. And then I heard it, the faintest crunch of sand underfoot, followed by a low, unsettling hum. The figures didn't move at first. They just stood there, still as statues, cloaked in shadow, almost blending into the night. I couldn't make out any details, but I could feel them. They were watching us. I glanced at Tessa, her eyes wide with fear. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I couldn't speak either. The fear was too thick. My throat felt tight and my stomach twisted in knots. For a moment, it seemed like they were waiting for us to make the first move. I didn't know what to do. The engine of my truck was dead, and we were stranded out here, miles from the nearest town. Then one of them moved. It wasn't much, just a slight shift of the figure's hand. But it was enough. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't a game. This wasn't some strange coincidence. We were in real danger. The figure took a step forward, and then another. The others followed, moving in unison, like they were connected by some invisible thread. The crunching of sand under their feet grew louder, closer. I didn't wait. I slammed my foot on the gas and floored it. The truck lurched forward, kicking up dust behind us. The headlights flickered back on just as we tore down the road, but I didn't dare look back. The figures were still there, still moving, following us. I could hear their footsteps echoing in the distance, growing louder and closer. Tessa screamed. I don't think I'd ever heard anyone scream like that before. It was a sound of pure terror, a sound that made the hair on my neck stand up. I could barely see the road ahead, only the dim lights illuminating the dust storm we were kicking up. But I had to keep driving. The truck's engine roared, but no matter how fast I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer. I risked a quick glance in the rearview mirror. Nothing, but I didn't let my guard down. It didn't make sense. They were still following us. I knew it. Tessa kept looking back too, her face pale, her hands gripping the seat. What are they? What do they want? She whispered. I don't know, I said, my voice hoarse. But we have to keep moving. We've been driving for what felt like hours, my mind racing. Every part of me screamed to keep going, But the truck's engine began to sputter, the vibrations in the steering wheel making it clear that something was wrong. I had to pull over. I cursed under my breath. The truck, jerking to a stop. The night was eerily quiet now, but that silence was just as unsettling as the chase. I didn't trust it. "Stay in the truck," I told Tessa. She nodded but didn't speak, her eyes wide with fear. I stepped out into the cold desert air, the wind biting at my skin. I popped the hood and peered inside, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. But I didn't have the expertise to fix it out here. Not now. Not with whatever or whoever was still out there. The engine was overheating. Steam hissed from the radiator, and there was no way I was going to get it fixed without help. But I wasn't going to wait. I wasn't going to sit here and let whatever was following us catch up. As I stood there, trying to figure out our next move, I saw it. A light, faint at first, but growing brighter by the second. It wasn't the headlights of another car. It was something different, almost like the glow of a distant lantern. It didn't move like a car's headlights. It swayed slightly, like someone was carrying it, walking through the desert. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The light didn't make sense. Who would be out here? Who could be this far out in the desert in the middle of the night? I turned back to the truck. Tessa had stepped out of the vehicle now, staring at the light, too. "Do you see that?" she whispered. "I see it," I said, my voice tight. And then, before I could say anything else, the light began to move toward us. I couldn't think. My heart pounded in my chest as I climbed back into the truck and slammed the door shut. "We need to go. Now!" I yelled. Tessa didn't hesitate. She jumped in beside me, and I started the engine, hoping it would work. It sputtered, coughed, and then finally it roared to life. We tore down the road again, the light in the distance growing larger, closer. I didn't look back. I couldn't, but the light, whatever it was, kept coming closer. It was almost like it was following us. No matter how fast I drove, it was there, right behind us, its glow flickering in the distance. The sound of footsteps again, quieter this time, but unmistakable. And then a voice, faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. "Turn back." I didn't understand what it meant. I had to get us out of here. But the road ahead wasn't getting any clearer. In fact, it was narrowing, becoming more and more desolate. There were no signs of civilization, no road markers, no lights, just endless darkness. And then it happened. The truck jerked again, the engine sputtering, the wheels spinning as I tried to steer it. It stalled. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, frustration and fear building up inside me. "No, no, no," I muttered under my breath. Tessa's voice trembled as she grabbed my arm. "We're stuck, aren't we?" I turned to her, my heart racing, and nodded. "Yeah, we're stuck." Before I could get out of the truck, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, closer now, and a voice, so clear this time, right outside the window. "You shouldn't have come back." I didn't dare look, but I could feel the presence. There was someone outside the truck. I could hear them, their breath, slow and deliberate. And the worst part, I could hear them breathing. Tessa gripped my arm tighter. "Noah, what do we do?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. Then a knock, a single knock on the window. And that's when I saw it. A face I knew, but it wasn't Tessa's, and it wasn't mine. I don't know how long I stared at that face of the window, but it felt like a lifetime. The air felt cold, even though it was the middle of the night. Every inch of me screamed to drive, to get out of there, but my hands were frozen on the steering wheel. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. There, just inches away, was a face I knew, but it wasn't Tessa. It wasn't anyone I recognized from my past. It was a stranger's face, pale and almost unnaturally still. The skin was unervingly smooth, as if it had been wiped clean of expression. The eyes, though, those dark eyes, deep and hollow, bored into me. My blood ran cold, and then the face smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It wasn't comforting. It was chilling, like the kind of smile you get when you know someone's been watching you, waiting for the right moment to strike. The corners of his lips curled upwards, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. For a moment, time seemed to slow. I couldn't move. I didn't know if I was dreaming or awake, but I could feel the weight of his gaze on me. It was as if he knew me, knew everything about me, but I couldn't remember ever meeting him. Tessa must have noticed my panic because she grabbed my arm. "Noah, what's happening? What's wrong with him?" I couldn't answer her. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the face outside the window. The figure knocked again, this time louder, and as the knock echoed in the silence, I finally managed to pull my gaze away. I slammed my foot down on the accelerator. I didn't wait. The engine roared to life with a lurch, and I slammed my foot down on the gas. The truck shot forward, and the headlights illuminated the dark, desolate road ahead of us. The figures outside, the ones who'd been watching us, were gone. I looked in the rear-view mirror, praying they weren't behind us. But all I could see was the darkness of the desert, stretching endlessly in every direction. The glow from my headlights barely cut through it. What the hell was that? Tessa asked, her voice shaky. She was staring at the spot where the man had stood. "I don't know. I don't know," I muttered, trying to control my breathing. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel like it was my lifeline. We drove for miles, both of us silent, lost in our own thoughts. The silence between us was thick, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. How could I explain what just happened? How could I even begin to explain the impossible, the inexplicable? And then, just as I thought I could relax, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and too close. I looked at the rearview mirror again, but all I could see was darkness. No one was behind us. I thought maybe I was hearing things. Maybe I was losing my mind after everything that had happened. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were coming from all around us now. No matter where I looked, the sound echoed like someone was circling the truck. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. And then the whispers, soft at first, but then growing louder. "You shouldn't have run. Leave before it's too late." The voices came from all directions, surrounding the truck, seeping through the windows, like they were coming from the very air around us. I turned the radio up, trying to drown out the sound, but it didn't help. The whispers were inside the truck now, all around us. Tessa was hyperventilating beside me. "Noah, stop the truck. Please stop. They're here." I didn't want to stop. I knew that if I stopped, if I gave in to whatever was stalking us, we'd be trapped. The figure outside the window, the whispers, they weren't human. But I couldn't keep driving forever. The road ahead seemed endless. The desert never seemed to end, and I was sure that if I kept going, we'd only drive deeper into whatever nightmare this was. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for some kind of hope, some sort of salvation. But as I drove, I noticed something off in the distance. A light. It wasn't the headlights of another vehicle. It wasn't even the glow of a town. This light, glowing softly, was stationary, but was too far away to make out any details. For some reason, I felt drawn to it. Maybe it was the only thing that felt like an answer. Maybe it was the only thing that might lead us out of this. I made a sharp turn off the road, heading toward the light. The truck jerked over the rough terrain, the wheels slipping and grinding over rocks and loose sand. But the light didn't seem to move. It stayed exactly where it was. "Where are you going?" Tessa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was holding on to the seat, staring out the window at the growing light. "What is that?" "I don't know," I said, my voice tense. "But I think it might be our only chance." As we drew closer, I saw what I should have seen earlier, a small town, abandoned, the light that had drawn us and was coming from a street lamp flickering in the middle of the main road. There were no signs of life, no other vehicles, no movement, just a faint glow of that single lamp casting eerie shadows across the dirt streets. I parked the truck, not sure what to do. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything. The figure, the voices, the lights. Tessa was the first to break the silence. "Noah, this place is wrong." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was dry, my mind racing with questions I had no answers for. We stepped out of the truck, and the air hit us like a punch. It was cold, but the desert was never this cold. Stay close, I said, trying to steady my breath. The town was like a ghost town, abandoned houses, empty streets. It looked like it had been untouched for years. The buildings had long since crumbled, windows shattered, doors hanging off their hinges. But there was something unsettling about the silence. It wasn't just the quiet, it was the stillness, like the town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. We walked down the main street, the faint light from the lamp casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The wind carried the scent of dust and decay. And then I saw it, a door, the only door in the town that was still intact. It was old, weathered, but it was closed, solid, almost like it was guarding something. I knew we shouldn't go inside. I knew it was a bad idea, but I couldn't help myself. Something was pulling me toward it. Something was telling me that the answers we needed, if there were any answers, were behind that door. I walked up to it, my heart pounding in my chest. My hand reached for the handle, but as I touched it, I heard it again. The footsteps, louder now, and then a voice. "We've been waiting for you." I froze, and then the door opened by itself. I couldn't breathe. The door was wide open now, and there was something inside, something that shouldn't be there. I couldn't see it at first, but I could feel it, like it was watching us, waiting. Then a shadow moved in the doorway, and the voice came again. "You're too late." We stood there in the doorway of that abandoned house, frozen. The air was thick with the smell of rot, like time itself had decayed in this place. The door creaked open wider, inviting us into whatever nightmare awaited inside. I didn't want to go in. Every instinct told me to run, to get in the truck and leave this cursed town behind. But something was pulling me forward, like a magnetic force that I couldn't resist. It was the same pull I felt when I first saw the light. The same feeling that kept us in the desert, running from whatever we'd encountered. Tessa hesitated beside me, her eyes wide with fear, but she followed me anyway. We stepped inside. The inside of the house was just as decayed as the outside. Dust and cobwebs clung to every surface. The air felt suffocating, like the walls themselves were holding secrets. But in the far corner, barely visible in the dim light, there was something, someone, a figure. I couldn't make out much, just the silhouette of a person sitting in the corner. As we moved closer, the figure turned to face us, and then the voice, a voice that sounded far too familiar. "You shouldn't have come back." I froze. It was the same voice I had heard in the desert, the same whisper from the dark, the same voice that had haunted me for so long. The figure stood, revealing a face that I recognized. It was me. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be, but there he was, my exact reflection, standing in front of me, a version of me that wasn't mine. This wasn't just some sick joke. This was something real, something I couldn't explain. "You've been running from this for too long, Noah," the figure, my doppelganger, said. "You can't escape what's coming. You never could." Tessa stepped back, her voice trembling. "What is this? What is going on?" I didn't know how to answer her. This wasn't possible. There had to be an explanation. But nothing made sense anymore. The desert, the figures, the whispers, it all led here to this moment. The figure smiled, a twisted, malicious grin that made my stomach turn. "You've been chosen, Noah. You've always been a part of this, whether you realize it or not." The room felt colder now, darker. The figure stepped forward, his eyes locked on mine. "You've always known you weren't meant to be free. The desert, the town, it's all connected. We've been waiting for you." I stepped back, my heart racing. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't answer at first. He just stared at me, his eyes burning with an intensity one couldn't comprehend. And then he spoke the words that seal my fate. "You have one choice, Noah. Stay with us. Embrace your true self. Or leave. But know this, the moment you leave, you'll never be free. Not from us. not from the desert, not from what you've done. I didn't know what he meant. What had I done? What was this madness? But I didn't have much time. I could feel the pressure building. The walls seemed to close in around me. I had to make a decision. I turned to Tessa, my mind racing. We need to leave. Now. But as I reached the door, it slammed shut. And then I heard it. The whisper again, only louder now. You can never leave. I knew then. I wasn't meant to leave. I had never been meant to leave. The desert had always been a part of me. A part of this cursed place. I'd been running, yes. But I had also been running toward something. Toward this moment. I turned to face the figure again, my heart heavy with the weight of the truth. Where are you? What is this place? The figure's smile twisted into something darker. This is your home, Noah. It always has been. The figure stepped closer. You will understand soon enough. The question is, Noah, do you want to face it now? Or live in fear for the rest of your days? I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But deep down, I knew there was no escaping this. No running. No hiding. The desert, the voices, the figures. They were all part of something much bigger. Something that had been waiting for me. But just as I opened my mouth to speak, the world around me began to shift. The room dissolved into darkness, and I heard a scream. Tessa's scream. I reached for her, but everything went black. And that's when I realized there was no escape. Everything was dark. I couldn't see. I couldn't move. But then, through the blackness, I heard something. A voice. Faint but clear. You're not alone, Noah. And then I felt it. A hand on my shoulder. And when I turned, there was no one there. Darkness surrounded me. My breath felt trapped, heavy in my chest. I could still feel the hand on my shoulder, its cold grip burning through me like ice. I turned, desperate to see who or what was there, but nothing, just the endless, empty darkness. Then, through the silence, a whisper, familiar yet distorted, echoing deep within me. Welcome home, Noah. Suddenly, images flashed through my mind, memories I had long forgotten. Camping trips as a child, faces I didn't recognize, conversations that felt eerily familiar but distant. Each memory came with a pang of fear and the realization that my past was not entirely mine. Then it hit me, a memory clearer than the rest, the abandoned town years earlier. I had been here before. How could I have forgotten? You've always belonged here, the voice whispered again, echoing like static in my mind. I spun around, suddenly aware of Tessa's absence. Panic surged through me. I called her name, but my voice was swallowed by silence. She was gone, taken perhaps, or simply vanished into the shadows. A new, darker dread crept into me. I was alone, trapped in this nightmare, but I couldn't abandon her. Not here, not like this. I moved through the decaying halls of the abandoned house, each step echoing loudly. But the building seemed endless, twisting and shifting, refusing to let me escape. Then I saw it, a door hidden within the shadows. It opened as I approached, revealing stairs descending into darkness. Every instinct told me to turn back, but my feet moved forward, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. As I descended, the air grew colder and thicker, and in the room at the bottom was something unimaginable, photos covering every wall, images of me, watching me from afar, from my youth until now. Hundreds of eyes, frozen moments, silently observing every step of my life. At the room's center stood a figure, cloaked and silent, waiting. Who are you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The figure turned slowly, pulling back the hood to reveal not my face this time, but that of someone else familiar. It was a man from the desert, the same man who warned me a year ago. He smiled sadly, his voice gentle yet filled with regret. I tried to save you from this, Noah, but you kept coming back. Curiosity is dangerous here. It's exactly what they want. I shook my head, confused. Who are they? His expression darkened. They're everywhere, watching, waiting. They collect us, those who wanted too close. Suddenly, the whispers returned, louder than ever. surrounding us. Shadows appear at the room's edges, figures hidden in darkness, eyes glowing faintly. "They've chosen you, Noah," the man said, voice trembling. "You're meant to become one of them." My heart pounded painfully. How do I stop it? He shook his head slowly. "You can't. But you might save her, Tessa. She's still pure, untouched by this place. If you're strong enough, if you resist their call, she might escape." The shadows surged forward. I knew my choice, my life or hers. Without hesitation, I turned, pushing through the figures, running toward the stairs. "Tessa!" I shouted, hoping my voice could reach her. "Get out! Now!" The house shook violently. Walls cracked and dust and debris fell around me. But through it all, I heard her distant cry. "Noah, where are you?" I didn't answer. If I led the shadows away, she might find her way out. Maybe she lived to tell this story, to expose whatever was hidden in this cursed desert. I stopped exhausted. The shadows circled me now, quiet and still. From the darkness stepped my reflection again, smiling knowingly. "You finally understand. Noah, you were never meant to leave. Your memories, your fears, this is your true self." I looked into his eyes, my own eyes, and finally understood. "You're not human." I whispered. "No," he replied calmly. "And now neither are you." My vision darkened. I felt myself slipping away, merging with the darkness, becoming part of something much older, much darker than I ever imagined. Then silence. Nothing but the whispering desert wind. But somewhere in the distance, faintly, came a woman's voice. Tessa's. "Noah, where are you?" Only now, she wasn't alone. Another voice whispered alongside hers. A voice like mine, but colder, darker. "We're right here." And so, our story ends. But the desert never releases its hold easily. Questions remain, answers hidden just out of reach. What happened to Noah? What are the collectors? And what fate awaits Tessa? Tell me your theories in the comments. If you want more stories that explore the unknown, make sure you subscribe. Hit the bell icon because, trust me, even darker mysteries are ahead. Stay vigilant. The desert is always watching.